Hello everyone, welcome back to Mummy Week. We are on part 5 of 7, looking at different mummy films. Today we are talking about 2017's The Mummy, starring Tom Cruise. Now before I get into this, I've mentioned this in other videos, but I want to bring it up here. My enjoyment of a movie is heavily dependent on what I expect from that movie. And my expectations are set oftentimes by what other people say about said movie. So, for example, everyone talked about how horrible Fantastic Four was, so when I went to see it, because I was expecting something so bad, I thought, this is fine. It's not good, but it's fine. Same thing with Dark Phoenix, same thing with New Mutants. On the other hand, when people put films up on a pedestal and they're like, oh my gosh, this movie's perfect, this movie is so good, it's so amazing, and then I go and see it, it's very difficult for a movie to live up to that expectation. So things like the original Star Wars trilogy, or the Lord of the Rings trilogy, or A Quiet Place. When I go to see it, I'm just like, it's okay, it's not great, it's amazing, this is weird, this is weird, this is weird, and then people get mad at me for it. So, we're talking about 2017's The Mummy. Everyone has talked about how bad this movie is. I had never seen it before. We've got everything about how the story doesn't make any sense, how the mummy's powers are vague and unexplained, how the guy just comes back to life at the end, how this really wanted to set up a cinematic universe and failed to do that. We've got all these things that I heard about, knew about. I still did not enjoy this movie. So this is like one of the few cases where everyone talks about how bad it is, and I watch it and I'm just like, yeah, it is. It really is that bad. And like, I've got my notes, I'll go through it, but like, it's just boring. That's the worst thing a movie can be. It's boring. I literally almost had to take a nap when I was done with this movie, because I was physically tired. I was yawning and I was dozing off. And if I didn't have other things that I had to do at that point in time, I would have taken a nap. It literally made me tired. And I didn't even watch it all in one sitting. I watched about an hour of it, stopped, did some laundry, did some other things around the house, and then continued it on. And I was still just so absolutely bored by it. So there's the TLDR version. But let's get into what I wrote down. So the Dark Universe, again, I knew that this was supposed to set this up. I knew how big of a failure it was. I knew about the picture that all the cast members weren't really together for, but they photoshopped in, right? And I had seen the Dark Universe logo around. I assumed that that was something that was maybe in a trailer or some other promotional material or just a promotional image. I don't know if I actually saw the footage of it moving as a logo. I did not realize they actually put that in this movie as like the first thing after the Universal logo. And that just makes it so much worse. Like, again, I already knew so much of that and how bad this movie failed at that. But like, actually seeing it in the runtime of the movie, I'm just like, wow, you guys. Okay, so I wrote down Perfect World Pictures, because then later on it says, like, a Perfect World Pictures / Dark Universe production. And I meant to look into that, and I haven't yet. So that's going to be something I'm going to look into later, is that a separate thing, or did they, like, make up a subdivision of some company just for this thing that failed? Okay, so we start in 1127 AD in England. Like I said, almost all these mummy movies have at least 2 time jumps, or 1 time jump and then a flashback. So we start at 1127. This one has some stuff going on in England, which is a little weird. They kind of explain it in the movie. I didn't, that's not why I disliked the movie, but it was like, most of the other mummy movies, there's stuff that takes place in Egypt, and there's stuff that takes place where the characters are from. And this one has a bunch of stuff taking place in neither of those locations. So a little odd, but whatever. So then we get this big jewel or stone. I don't know what they call it. I don't know what it's supposed to be, but the big red rock. And that reminded me of the big red rock in, I think it was the 1998 version, where I wrote down cheap jewels. So it looks better in this movie, right? But that concept of this big red jewel being important, it's not important in the same ways, but it made me wonder if that was a reference or a callback or just a coincidence to that earlier Mummy movie. I wrote down the name Princess Amenet. Okay, so then I wrote flashback again. Oh, vowed to bring demon into the world. I'm sorry, into the body of mortal man. So I can't claim originality on this, but the pitch meeting video for this has a bit about how she makes a deal with the god of death. And he's like, what does she get? And he's like, the power to kill a baby and a sleeping person. And I had seen that video before I watched this movie, and I didn't even register it when I watched this movie, but then I watched that video again afterwards, and I was just like, yeah, why did she make a deal with him? She just killed the people. She could have done that anyway. So, not my point, but still a valid point. And then they specifically say in this movie that she was mummified alive. That's a phrase that I've used talking about some of the older movies, and I realized that I've used it wrong, because a lot of the times they are buried alive or killed alive, but not actually mummified. So, if anyone is angry at my misuse of the term, I realize I did it wrong. I just don't care. Okay, then I wrote, Nick is the worst. This is one of those things where I understand that there's difficulty in creating a likable character that's also, like, kind of a jerk, you know, kind of that on the edge of, is he cool, is he just mean, blah, 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 and, like, it's not something that I can, you know, put my finger up, but, like, again, comparing this to Brendan Fraser, because that's my Mummy movie, like, he's not the nicest guy, right? Obviously, he kisses Evie without consent, not cool. He did think he was dying at the time, that doesn't make it okay, but then, like, we see throughout the rest of the film, different choices that he makes or whatever, but, like, so you believe that even though he's not perfect, he's got some serious flaws, he's a good protagonist for the story. And I can't, like, Nick starts out awful because he's like, we're gonna, you know, rob stuff and then sell it, right? And that's not good, but, like, there are other characters that could start off that way that could get redeemed, and they try to redeem Nick in this movie, and I just don't buy it. And I don't know if it's just, I don't particularly care for Tom Cruise. I don't hate him or anything like that, but, like, I haven't seen very many of his movies. I'm not a fan of his, so maybe it's just that I've got this off feeling towards him that keeps me from buying into his growth as a character, but, like, you know, so much of what they try to do with him comes from the character of Jenny, and based on their interactions when we first meet them, she doesn't seem like someone that he actually cares about, so the fact that a lot of what he does is because he actually cares about her, I just don't buy it. Whereas when Rick O'Connell met Evie, he didn't know her at all, and all he was thinking about was that he was going to die, right? And it was wrong that he didn't consider her opinions on things. He only acted in his own self-interest, but I guess it's just more understandable when you're like, he's literally about to die, he doesn't care anymore. And so then when they actually meet and know each other and have experiences together, you buy that growth. Maybe it's just that Rachel Weisz and Brendan Fraser had better on-screen chemistry than Tom Cruise and whoever this person was. I don't know. This is one of those things that I can't specifically explain why. I started off not liking Nick, and I saw the movie trying to make me like him more, and I just didn't. I didn't like him by the end, and so when he's like, come on, let's go rob the pyramids together, I was just like, you should be dead. And I wish you were dead. Not Tom Cruise, the character of Nick. And it's very difficult for me to enjoy a film where I don't care about the protagonist, which is why I don't particularly like the original Star Wars film, because Luke Skywalker is a whiny baby, and I don't care about his problems. Oh, boy. That's going to get me in trouble. Okay, there's this big, very long, very extended bit with Nick and Vale where Tom Cruise keeps saying, let me think, I'm thinking, let me think, I'm thinking, let me think, I'm thinking, just let me think. And Vale is like, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? And it's like, do people talk like that? I understand people might say, let me think, or I'm thinking. I've never ever heard someone respond to that with, what are you thinking? And it seemed like a very forced line to then lead into the line of, I'm thinking we're going to die here. But you don't need that from Vale. You know, just Winnie the Pooh it and be like, think, 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 think. Or, you know, the Easter Island head from what is it? Night at the Museum? Is that the guy that says, I'm thinking? Maybe I'm thinking of something else. But, like, you could just have Tom Cruise say that he's thinking a couple times, and then you can still have that line if you like that. It seems like they really like that line of, I'm thinking we're going to die here. But, like, it's so long, and it's said so many times, I'm just like, is this a reference to something? Like, it felt like it was supposed to be more than it was. And that kind of stuff is what very early on makes a movie boring. When you're really, really highlighting this nothingness, and I'm trying to figure out what the point of it is, and then there is no point of it, I'm just like, okay, so I just need to not try that hard, I guess. I don't know. It's very strange. Very strange. Okay. And then I wrote down, those chains aren't for bringing it out, properly bring it out. So they're talking about this prison that the mummy's in, and they literally say the phrase, those chains aren't for bringing it out, and then they go on to say, like, it was for putting her in or something, blah, 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 blah. And then Tom Cruise shoots a thing, and the chains bring her out. And I'm like, was that supposed to be a joke? I don't think that was supposed to be a joke. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt like the movie literally forgot the line that it said less than 30 seconds prior. If the movie's not going to pay attention to itself, why should I? Later on I wrote, Vale is also the worst. I don't remember why I wrote that, but again, if I don't care about your protagonist, and I don't care about his sidekick, and honestly I don't even care about Jenny, I don't like the movie. None of the characters are characters that I'm compelled to be rooting for. Oh, why is the military involved in archaeology? So, military stuff is happening, kind of, and then Jenny shows up, and if they explained why she was there, what she had to do with anybody else other than her one-night stand with Tom Cruise, I missed that. But then she's like, just with them and flying in their planes and stuff. And I'm like, is she with them? Is she part of this military unit? Why is this military unit interested in archaeological artifacts? I don't understand. And again, by this point, I've tried paying attention to certain things that went nowhere. So I've not tried as hard. So if there was something that was said once, well, that's not good enough at this point anymore. The movie has taught me to not pay that much attention. Okay. Then we get the scene where the plane is going down. And every time we see the plane falling, it's moving like this. In a straight line. And every time we cut to the inside of the plane, they're moving like this. Like it's Inception and the hallway's turning around. The plane is not spinning as it's going down. Why are the characters moving around like that? I understand like a zero gravity effect, and I understand that that's how they filmed it, but they're not free falling in the scene. They're hitting different sides and ceilings and floors with impact, as if the thing that they're inside is rotating and they are not. But the thing that they're inside is not rotating. If you're doing a Tom Cruise movie, you know that people are going to expect a stunt. I don't. I haven't seen any of the Mission Impossibles yet. Don't worry. That will be a whole series once the 7th one comes out. But I'm like, this is like the big thing, right? People want to see Tom Cruise in a stunt. And so, again, I'm like paying more attention than I probably should. But I'm like, that's not how the plane's moving. Nothing in this movie makes any sense. And then this is where the movie really, really lost me. So she gets a parachute, she goes out, and we just watch Tom Cruise sitting in this doorway as the plane approaches the ground. And I know he's not going to die. And so at that moment in the movie, I was just like, if you're going to show me this and then have him survive and not explain it, I'm out. Right? And the most they do as an explanation is they, you know, Vale says, you're cursed, man. But, like, they don't elaborate on that. They don't explain that. They don't, you know, how does that work? Does he get injured and then recover? She says something about how he doesn't have a scratch on him. But then later on, he gets beat up a bunch, and it seems like he's taking damage. So, it's so lazily done. And it shows me that the people that worked on this movie do not care about things that make sense. So that was the point in the movie where I was out. I was like, I'm done trying. I'm done caring. I will finish the movie to see if there's something cool visually later on. But at that point, I had no hope of enjoying this movie anymore. So all I wrote down was, I'm sorry, how did he survive? Or how did Nick survive? And then they just never go there. And then I put between the crash and then being in a plastic bag. So, like, even if he doesn't take damage, he was in a plastic bag. He would have suffocated, right? But we don't see him suffocating. We don't see air movement. So he was just not breathing for an extended period of time. And he's... So if he was unconscious from the plane crash, enough so that he seemed to be dead, and they put him in a body bag, and they gave him a toe tag, that implies that he can take damage, because he wasn't visibly alive. So if he can take damage, and he's sealed inside a plastic bag, how is he then okay? Nobody else lets him out of the bag for him to then recover later on. He recovers. Doesn't make sense. This frustrates me. It frustrates me how nonsensical it is. My next note says, oh look, bird jump scares. How original. I've mentioned this probably in half a dozen videos at this point. Horror movies that aren't actually scary love to use birds to try to add scares in. Oh, and then I wrote Ratcatcher. I don't remember what scene made me write that, but I guess there were some rats in a scene. And I literally watched this movie right after watching The Suicide Squad. And so I had Ratcatcher in mind because she's a big part of that movie. So, not really relevant to the movie, but at this point, things that are relevant to the movie make me angry. So I chose to think of a better movie, The Suicide Squad. My next note literally just says, I'm so confused. Because I totally lost what was happening. Alright, so then we get to Jekyll and Prodigium. Now here, this is another thing that I had heard people complain about Russell Crowe's interpretation of Dr. Jekyll. And more specifically, his interpretation of Mr. Hyde. And I had heard the main complaint that there's no transformation. He just talks with a different accent, right? And how stupid, blah, blah, blah. Now, at the time of recording these, I have not yet made my videos for the Jekyll and Hyde movies. Those are going to be released before these videos, so if you're watching this, they're already out. Go check those out. But at the time I watched this, I had not yet done my Jekyll movies, and I hadn't read the book yet. So when I finished this movie, because I really wanted to try to give it the best chance of getting something right, I knew in the back of my head that most pop culture adaptations of Jekyll and Hyde are not accurate to the book. And I felt like I had heard at some point that the idea of him transforming into this monster or whatever was not from the book. So I thought in my head, I was like, maybe this is the one thing the movie got right. Maybe everything else is horrible, everything else is wrong, but maybe they did an accurate Jekyll Hyde transformation or lack thereof. So, I read the book, just finished it right before recording this video. No, it turns out in the book, there is a transformation, but Hyde actually gets smaller earlier on and then slowly grows over time, but he's never a big monster, so all the main popular adaptations are also still wrong because he doesn't grow into a big monster. But he's also not identical to Jekyll. People in the story that see Mr. Hyde, they don't think he's a monster. They do think that he's evil, but they don't recognize him as Jekyll. So I tried. I read a book for you, movie, and you got that wrong too. Oh man, oh man, oh man. I wrote down Prodigium. I thought, maybe it would be important. But again, as the pitch meeting guy says, it was their shield, except it didn't go anywhere. Okay, so then we have the line that Jenny says, "Somewhere in there is a good man." And I just wrote, nah, because I didn't see anything that made me believe that. I wrote again, I'm so confused. And then my last note is, so he can scare people back to life. Because Jenny was dead and drowned and done, and he scared her back to life. And then we don't see how he brings Vale back, but like, he died, again, as pitch meeting said, he died in a plane crash. His body would have been destroyed, and he's just back. So he can scare people back to life. Death is no longer a factor. Did they not think that that would affect movies in the future of this franchise if one of the characters could just bring anyone back from the dead? How are there any stakes then? This movie was bad. This movie was boring. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. But those are my thoughts. Thank you for watching, and have a good day. Hey everybody, Sam Tom here. Just wanted to let you know that I have 2 channels. If you're watching my music content, I also have a movie channel where I talk about movies and TV shows. If you're watching my movie content, I have a music channel where I do song covers, instrument demos, things like that. So feel free to check that out. Obviously, like, share, subscribe, comment, all that YouTube stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.